Merci d'être présents. Bonjour mesdames et messieurs. Nous ne sommes pas très nombreux pour cette deuxième séance, mais ce n'est pas important parce qu'il me semble que les meilleurs sont là. Je vois Fonce Leroy notamment et ça me fait très plaisir, Fonce, que tu sois avec nous cet après-midi. Donc cet atelier porte sur la digitalisation et l'emploi, plus particulièrement sur le travail et le travail atypique. I would like to start in English, if you don't mind. When I made this introduction, I was thinking about a title, and I was a bit wondering what could it be interesting. So I decided to call my introduction, Does it mean that the daily hired and daily paid workers are back in this new labor market? It would be a truism to say that the digitalization will have consequences in all domains. We already knew this. We can say that all workers will be concerned on one way or another. Indeed, the number of jobs in certain professions will significantly decline. The associated know-how are going to be quickly obsolete and will have to be quickly adapted. Otherwise, learn and let live could become live and let die. Title of one of the oldest James Bonds that we all saw once. Yes, the labor market is going to change drastically. Of course, the transformations of work do not date of yesterday. We even talk about the fourth revolution. The digitalization of the economy is only one of the components of these transformations. Thus, several structural reforms, such as the Hartz reform in Germany and the reform resulting from the economic crisis of 2008, had already modified the work, with a lot of fixed-term contracts, as in France, CDI or CDD now, part-time job in USA, on-call jobs, as we have in my country, but also in many others, and quasi-employments. The digitalization is going to accelerate these changes and generalize them in the sector of the economy which are known to be fragile, for example, the services in the EU. We know that these changes are beneficial in the short term for many companies, but how will it be in the medium and long term? Recruitment costs a lot. Answer to call for tenders need a lot of time. What about the knowledge and skill management? Do the knowledge of a company survive through so many changes? On the other side, they are beneficial for the well-trained workers of the RCT sector, where the need for them is very important. But what about the other sector? Those where the competition is at national and international level is very high. What about the sector where the presence of trade union is almost inexistent? What about the state? Do you think that the taxation authority are happy with the lack of visibility in earnings and the decrease of taxes? I don't think so. In the long term, who is going to assure the minimum to these self-employed people without income, without insurance, without pension, if they are not hired any longer, even on a daily basis? Several states try to find solutions and try to answer these challenges the best they can for the moment. The European Commission is also doing it. Dr. Max Huber will talk about this later this afternoon. In my country, Switzerland, we had to lead several studies on the request of the Parliament and the Federal Council, our government. My colleague, Dominique Haury, will summarize them to you. But first, Mrs. Céline Gratatour will present on one hand what PES can do to better identify the changes in profession trends and the skills that will be required. She will also present some ideas on how the PES can promote lifelong learning and transform themselves and become more agile. Mrs. Janinberg, labor market economist and senior ILO expert, will get to the heart of the matter of this session and present the result of a major ILO study on the situation of form of work around the world. So this session is mainly about non-standard work around the world, with example from France, from the European Union, and from Switzerland. The floor is yours, Mrs. Gratatour.
Merci beaucoup et merci pour l'invitation à la conférence et à participer à cette session. Donc je vais vous présenter en fait quelques éléments par rapport à un partenariat qui est en cours sur l'impact du numérique sur le marché du travail et les enjeux d'emploi. Donc je suis Céline Gradadour, je travaille dans l'Agence française de développement, en particulier dans la division éducation, formation, emploi. Alors l'AFD envisage de devenir un bailleur numérique, ça veut dire de transformer en profondeur tant ses modes opératoires que de former en fait ses équipes sur l'impact du numérique. En particulier en matière d'éducation, de formation et emploi, nous avons élaboré une stratégie qui vise à soutenir la transition numérique au service de sociétés apprenantes et innovantes. Ça a des conséquences importantes, donc ce volet éducation, ce volet formation. Je me concentrerai essentiellement aujourd'hui sur les questions d'emploi et de travail décent, en présentant quelques exemples français et en essayant de voir comment ça peut impacter nos réflexions sur nos opérations dans les marchés du travail au Sud. Alors, on a dans notre axe, notre feuille de route, 5 axes d'intervention assez classiques. L'un sur le renforcement de l'employabilité des jeunes, l'appui aux politiques et services d'emploi, l'accompagnement de la création d'emplois tant à travers l'auto-emploi que l'emploi salarié, l'amélioration de la qualité et enfin le renforcement des enjeux d'inclusion sociale et professionnelle pour des personnes en situation de grande vulnérabilité. Vulnérabilité qui soit au choc politique, climatique, économique. Donc on a un fort enjeu aujourd'hui à voir comment le numérique peut améliorer nos projets, nos modes opératoires. Du coup, comment en tant que bailleur, on peut essayer d'accompagner au mieux les acteurs, nos contreparties, nos partenaires sur l'intégration du numérique. Alors, on a établi un partenariat avec le CNUM et la FING, le Conseil supérieur du numérique, la Fondation Internet Nouvelle Génération, qui travaille en fait avec le Premier ministre français et l'Élysée sur l'impact du numérique, sur différentes actions du gouvernement, tant en termes d'éducation, en termes d'emploi, que l'impact de l'intelligence artificielle. La finalité du partenariat pour nous, c'est d'être sensibilisés, acculturés, formés sur l'impact du numérique et du coup d'avoir aussi une meilleure réflexion sur comment le numérique peut impacter les projets qu'on accompagne, notamment au Maroc et en Côte d'Ivoire, pays dans lesquels on va organiser des événements, des ateliers en juin pour essayer de mieux comprendre ensemble l'impact qu'on a sur le marché du travail. Première grande étape, le numérique nous encourage à être très modestes parce qu'on ne sait pas. Donc la première grande étape, c'est d'observer, de se donner les moyens d'observer les transformations du travail et de l'emploi. Alors souvent on se pose la question de le numérique, est-ce qu'il crée ou est-ce qu'il détruit les emplois ? Concrètement, ce n'est pas aussi simple que ça. Il y a un dernier rapport du Conseil d'orientation pour l'emploi en France qui dit qu'il y a moins de 10% finalement d'emplois existants qui sont susceptibles de disparaître dans un contexte d'autonomisation et de numérisation. En revanche, 50% des emplois existants vont évoluer fortement et du coup, ça induit en fait des ajustements majeurs sur les compétences attendues et les métiers. Quand on regarde l'impact du numérique, encore une fois, sur l'emploi, on voit bien qu'une approche seulement quantitativiste de création, destruction d'emplois n'est pas suffisante parce que ça ne permet pas de saisir du coup les enjeux de recomposition des chaînes de valeur, les nouvelles divisions du travail, la recomposition des métiers. Et donc ça implique aussi une approche beaucoup plus qualitative sur les formes de polarisation et la création de richesses. Plus précisément, en fait, on voit que quand on regarde les travaux, alors c'est Oxford Internet Institute sur la géographie, les formes entre l'offre et la demande de travail numérique, on voit que les polarisations sont beaucoup plus complexes et reforment un petit peu les chaînes de valeur qui existent. On voit aussi que Aujourd'hui, on parle beaucoup de emploi-travail. Finalement, quand on regarde les marchés du travail au sud, en Afrique par exemple, qui sont essentiellement représentés par du secteur informel et beaucoup de pluriactivité, on voit que l'évolution du marché du travail, par exemple en France, converge vers aussi cette notion d'activité qui transcende un peu la notion emploi-travail. Sans parler d'ubérisation du marché du travail, parce qu'on n'a pas du tout envie d'être trop négatif, il y a de plus en plus de pluriactifs en France. Quelqu'un qui a un métier dans la restauration, qui va être chauffeur Uber la nuit, voire mettre son appartement en Airbnb le week-end, etc., ou éventuellement travailler pour Deliveroo pour ajuster les fins de mois. Donc cette pluriactivité, c'est une réalité. Donc ça implique en fait énormément de choses sur l'impact, l'intégration du numérique, tant dans nos organisations que dans les projets qui impactent l'emploi et le marché du travail. Il y a eu un rapport qui a été publié par la FING qui s'appelle Transition et qui réfléchit à comment le numérique va impacter notre rapport au travail et le fonctionnement de nos organisations. Et quand on dit organisation, c'est au niveau d'une nation, comme la France par exemple, mais aussi au niveau de l'Agence française de développement, au niveau de vos services de l'emploi, au niveau des ministères, etc. En effet, alors je vais essayer d'être plus rapide, mais il y a 7 leviers en gros du numérique et de leur impact sur l'économie. Le premier, c'est l'optimisation des processus de production et d'organisation du travail au nom de l'efficience et de l'efficacité. C'est vraiment dans une optique d'améliorer l'existant plutôt que de le transformer en profondeur. Le deuxième, c'est l'amélioration de la prise de décision à partir des données d'analyse du passé, donc c'est l'enjeu de la domotique par exemple. Le troisième, c'est le fait qu'on utilise beaucoup plus des applications aujourd'hui qui se basent sur des données et qui se basent sur des algorithmes. Donc c'est l'exemple par exemple de Booking ou d'Airbnb dans le secteur hôtelier. Quatrième grand impact, c'est le caractère disruptif du numérique. C'est un bien grand mot pour juste dire que c'est souvent, en fait, c'est plus une approche top-down, mais c'est une approche très ascendante où des innovations viennent du bas et montent en compétences, montent en gamme jusqu'à remplacer des concurrents bien établis dans la chaîne de valeur. Le meilleur exemple reste quand même Uber sur cette question-là. Deuxième up, pour aller plus vite, autre levier, c'est l'ouverture. En fait, le numérique ouvre des frontières pour les bonnes ou des mauvaises raisons, mais ça permet en fait d'accéder à des données, de partager ces données et d'encourager la collaboration autour de ces données et le partage de décisions. Donc en lien avec ça, c'est aussi le caractère capacitant ou collaboratif. Ça encourage des échanges et des pratiques de pair à pair beaucoup plus horizontales que seulement verticales de prise de décision. Et enfin, agile, et c'est ce qu'on essaye, on se dit toujours l'AFD devrait être un partenaire agile, c'est essayer de voir comment on peut être dans nos projets, avec nos contreparties clients, un peu plus adaptatif et un peu plus incrémental. C'est-à-dire, au lieu de faire un immense projet et 4 ans après, on se retourne et on essaye de se poser la question de sa valeur ajoutée, de son impact, on essaye de faire un processus de stop and go où on teste, on pilote, on apprend et on recommence, on adapte pour essayer d'être un peu plus flexible et surtout mieux adapté au contexte dans lequel on intervient. Alors comment on essaye de capter? L'enjeu est vraiment de gagner en flexibilité. Il y a différents enjeux qui peuvent impacter notamment les observatoires des marchés du travail ou de branches dans les pays comme le Maroc, la Côte d'Ivoire ou autres. C'est d'essayer d'avoir une observation plus fine des usages du numérique. Je donne toujours le même exemple, mais en Côte d'Ivoire, par exemple, il y a l'agence emploi jeune va avoir sur son site internet, on va dire une centaine d'offres d'emploi et de CV. Là où juste à côté, il y a un entrepreneur du numérique qui a créé une boîte qui, en l'espace d'une semaine, arrivait à avoir 18 000 bêta-testeurs. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il y avait un usage un peu plus flexible aussi des modes de recherche d'emploi, des méthodes en fait qui sont adoptées. Sauf que cette personne-là rencontre Obama à la Maison-Blanche, mais ne va pas rencontrer l'agence emploi jeune. Donc il y a un enjeu aujourd'hui pour des services de l'emploi et des acteurs publics ou l'AFD, tout bailleur qui intervient sur ces questions-là, à capter en fait ces évolutions, à mieux les observer et à mieux les intégrer dans nos pratiques. Il y a aussi un vrai enjeu d'exploitation des données. Alors pareil, je pense que je prêche des convaincus, mais quand on travaille sur l'emploi, le travail, là on est face à une montagne qui est des enquêtes avec tout leur caractère confidentiel. Et du coup, finalement, on est dans une solution où on a beaucoup de données du marché du travail, mais pas forcément une réflexion très fine sur leurs usages pour des fins de politique ou de pilotage des politiques. Et donc ça aussi, c'est quelque chose qu'on pense, en tout cas, qui peut avoir un énorme impact, c'est encourager l'ouverture des données, bien sûr une ouverture contrôlée, données du secteur public, données des acteurs privés, des branches du patronat, pour avoir une meilleure analyse et donc des outils plus productifs du marché du travail, donc à la fois des compétences demandées par les secteurs privés et du coup une évolution de l'offre de formation en conséquence. Donc gros volet sur l'observation, deuxième gros volet sur l'employabilité. On voit bien qu'il y a un vrai enjeu qui est que la fracture numérique, ce qu'on disait il y a quelque temps entre les générations, entre les personnes un peu plus âgées et les personnes plus jeunes, c'est pas aussi simple que ça aujourd'hui. Il n'y a pas une fracture, il y en a plusieurs qui ne sont pas que générationnelles, mais aussi sociales, territoriales. Donc il y a un vrai enjeu à travailler sur cette médiation numérique, c'est-à-dire ne pas laisser quelqu'un au bout du chemin, etc. Et donc ça veut dire que l'apprentissage de ces nouvelles compétences doit être pour tout le monde et en permanence. On va être, je pense qu'on va tous être amenés à faire évoluer nos métiers en profondeur dans les années à venir. Ça veut dire qu'on va devoir tous apprendre et apprendre à apprendre ensemble. Donc c'est des massifications des besoins en compétences et en médiation numérique qu'il faut accompagner. Donc ça c'est un grand axe de notre intervention en tant que bailleurs dans les pays ou dans les marchés du travail au Sud, c'est comment accompagner ces besoins en compétences en termes de formation professionnelle initiale et continue pour accompagner des trajectoires professionnelles qui évoluent profondément. Donc, ce qui est aussi important à comprendre, c'est que même si on doit intégrer le numérique dans nos pratiques, ça ne veut pas dire qu'on va tous être des spécialistes EdTech ou des geeks en puissance. C'est pas forcément ça, mais ça veut dire avoir des compétences numériques de base qui nous permettent d'être flexibles et d'adapter nos métiers. Et donc ça veut dire aussi renforcer, mais ça, les soft skills des jeunes qui arrivent sur le marché du travail, dans leur capacité à entreprendre avec les autres, à agir avec et à apprendre ensemble. Et donc être beaucoup plus acteurs de ces transformations. Alors, il y a un vrai enjeu dans tout ça qui est l'inclusion en fait de tout le monde. Donc c'est vraiment d'arriver à toucher toutes les populations et même celles qui sont les plus éloignées. Il y a différentes possibilités pour cela. On essaye de tester l'idée de tiers-lieux ou de Fab Lab qui intégrerait en fait des acteurs, des artisans par exemple du bâtiment et autres qui ne sont pas forcément très bien formés sur le numérique, avec des jeunes de l'université qui permettent de travailler avec eux sur leurs pratiques. Les artisans du bâtiment, ils ont des super bonnes connaissances des métiers, du terrain et des besoins. Les étudiants universitaires, ils ont peut-être une meilleure connaissance de comment développer des produits et les développer dans les chaînes de valeur. Et donc, comment faire travailler tout ce beau monde ensemble à travers des tiers-lieux au niveau local qui permettent justement de s'appuyer sur les compétences des uns et des autres. Il y a aussi un énorme enjeu et qui est compliqué sur la certification. On voit que ces compétences-là numériques sont très granulaires et dynamiques. Elles évoluent en profondeur. Ce n'est pas des nouveaux métiers, c'est plutôt des modules dans les métiers qui existent. Donc c'est arriver à certifier en fait ces compétences nouvelles au fur et à mesure du développement des parcours. Alors là, il y a pas mal de choses aussi qui sont intéressantes. Il y a notamment IBM qui crée un système d'open badge qui permet de certifier vos compétences, mais pas que des compétences professionnelles, qui sont aussi liées à votre investissement associatif ou autre. Et il y a ça, ce type d'approche se développe beaucoup au niveau territorial. J'ai pris l'exemple de Badjan, la Normandie, mais c'est assez intéressant là-dessus pour dire au niveau d'un territoire, la région va accompagner les individus dans la certification de leurs compétences aussi diverses et variées. Enfin, sécuriser les trajectoires professionnelles. Alors la collègue du BIT va rentrer plus en détail, mais en gros, il y a un vrai enjeu de précarisation des travailleurs. Je pense aux fermes à clic qui sont notamment en train de se développer à Madagascar. Donc ça veut dire qu'arriver à adapter des programmes de formation professionnelle, de protection sociale, etc., de dialogue social, qui soient adaptés à cette nouvelle forme de travail. Mais et idem sur encore plus dans les marchés du travail du Sud, secteur informel, c'est d'arriver à travers l'outil numérique peut-être à mieux informer, à simplifier des démarches, notamment par exemple sur le statut d'auto-employeur en Côte d'Ivoire, développer des systèmes de protection sociale adaptés et monter en compétence en fait ces travailleurs. Donc je ne parle pas, mais il y a des nouvelles formes alternatives de collectifs au travail, notamment quelque chose sur les coopératives d'activité d'emploi qui permettent de transférer en fait de l'information à ces individus et de mieux en fait renforcer leur pouvoir de négociation ensemble. Et ça, c'est des choses sur lesquelles on aimerait, on travaille beaucoup. Et après, il y a aussi beaucoup de choses qui sont développées en France, et là, c'est très franco-français, sur le compte personnel d'activité, qui est un portefeuille en fait de droits, et du coup qui est développable avec de droits et de services, qui permettent aussi d'évoluer beaucoup plus finement et de manière plus flexible au niveau professionnel. Et enfin, les conséquences sur le service d'emploi et les enjeux d'orientation. Alors, il y en a plein, et c'est pour ça qu'on s'intéresse autant à l'impact du numérique, en particulier pour les services publics de l'emploi. C'est un vrai enjeu sur les démarches administratives, l'information, etc. Ça permet d'avoir des outils qui sont beaucoup plus fins. En France, toujours, il y a un site sur l'Emploi Store ou mesaides.fr qui est vraiment d'être beaucoup plus à l'aise sur les démarches administratives, où il y en a beaucoup en France, en gros, et donc d'essayer d'avoir une vision plus claire sur ce à quoi on est éligible et pas. C'est aussi des enjeux pour le service du public de l'emploi à travers leur réforme, en fait, des données du marché du travail et la capacité en temps réel de comprendre les usages du numérique. C'est aussi une possibilité de bénéficier de l'innovation en fait d'acteurs peut-être plus petits et plus agiles. Donc je prends toujours l'exemple de la Fabrique ou de l'Emploi Store, où en gros un acteur comme Service public de l'emploi français, Pôle emploi, va travailler avec des acteurs innovants et va les incuber pour apprendre de l'intérieur avec leur démarche, leur mode opératoire, des bonnes pratiques, et d'innover donc ensemble. Donc au lieu de créer un département recherche de Pôle emploi, ils vont s'appuyer sur des structures innovantes, des startups qui ont déjà la capacité et qui vont les faire bouger de l'intérieur. Donc ça, c'est des choses sur lesquelles, pareil, on travaille en Côte d'Ivoire, au Nigeria et en Afrique du Sud, pour faire rapprocher des startups assez innovantes, notamment sur les données du marché du travail, et des acteurs services publics de l'emploi. Voilà. Donc ça, c'est un exemple 1. Il y a aussi beaucoup de choses à faire sur tout ce qui est orientation. C'est pas évident de comprendre en fait les métiers qu'on peut faire ou les emplois qu'on peut occuper sur la base des formations qu'on a développées. Et du coup, il y a beaucoup de choses qui peuvent être faites sur le partage d'informations sur la mobilité professionnelle, ou renforcer en fait des échanges de pair à pair au sein des services de l'emploi, avec notamment des services de mentorat entre des personnes en poste et des jeunes candidats. Voilà, j'espère que j'ai été relativement... j'ai essayé d'aller vite. Encore une fois, c'est un partenariat qui est en cours. C'est pour ça aussi que je vous ai donné autant d'exemples qui viennent plus du nord que du sud. C'est parce qu'on vient juste de démarrer et on a comme ambition que les ateliers qu'on va organiser au Maroc et en Côte d'Ivoire vont nous apporter beaucoup plus d'éléments sur, en gros, est-ce que c'est une énorme utopie, tout ce qu'on vient de dire, sur la transformation, ou est-ce qu'il y a des réalités et ça fait écho à certaines problématiques importantes, notamment au Maroc et en Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Gratadou. Dans la session précédente, nous avons attendu la fin pour passer aux questions. Je crois que nous pourrions changer de méthode et demander s'il y a des questions maintenant, parce que vous allez peut-être oublier ce qui vous a interpellé dans sa présentation. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions actuellement à Madame Gratadou, où tout a été très clair, les exemples qu'elle vous a donnés? S'il n'y en a pas, moi j'aimerais quand même vous en poser une. Nous sommes ici au Maroc. J'ai parlé tout à l'heure avec des Marocaines sur la situation ici. Si vous aviez des conseils à donner à l'ANAPEC, qui est maintenant la présidence de notre association, l'Amsep, qu'est-ce que vous leur donneriez comme conseil? Ou peut-être que vous ne pouvez pas répondre à ma question.
Alors, après, moi j'ai une position délicate puisque nous, on est un partenaire de l'ANAPEC et du ministère de l'Emploi, enfin du Travail et de l'Insertion professionnelle, et qu'on a un énorme projet en cours d'instruction justement sur l'opérationnalisation de la stratégie nationale d'emploi et qui intègre un gros volet sur le digital. Donc, tous les éléments en fait que je vous ai transmis là aujourd'hui sont des éléments sur lesquels on travaille ensemble avec l'ANAPEC et le ministère du Travail. Les principaux axes, par contre, c'est vraiment là où on va aller le plus loin, je pense, c'est le développement de la formation professionnelle, à la fois sur la formation au code, mais aussi sur le portage en fait des formations courtes qualifiantes pour s'adapter au métier du numérique. Le deuxième gros point, c'est sur l'observation du marché du travail et l'ouverture des données, avec essayer de travailler beaucoup plus la CGEM, l'observatoire de branche et l'observatoire du marché du travail sur l'usage de la donnée et d'essayer de voir comment mieux piloter cette donnée ensemble. Voilà, et puis après, il y a toute la question de l'entrepreneuriat et cette capacité du service de l'emploi à travers des lieux et des missions renouvelées sur ce volet-là, à faire travailler ensemble des acteurs qui ne se côtoient pas.
Comme par exemple les agences privées qui elles-mêmes récoltent beaucoup d'informations sur le marché du travail.
Oui, en fait, mais c'est même pas à eux auxquels j'aurais pensé en premier, parce qu'au Maroc, il y en a pas, c'est pas forcément là où il y a le plus de. C'est surtout au niveau de petites start-up qui travaillent sur, encore une fois, la collecte sur l'offre et la demande du marché du travail et qui font ce job matching en ligne. Donc il y a un vrai intérêt pour un service de l'emploi à mieux travailler avec eux au lieu de redéfinir des process ou procéder à des collectes d'informations avec des enquêtes qui sont très coûteuses. Donc c'est d'essayer d'avoir une meilleure réflexion sur l'usage du numérique pour la collecte et l'analyse de la donnée du marché du travail. Et ça permet derrière de réfléchir à un meilleur pilotage de l'action publique et privée.
Merci. Quelqu'un veut rebondir sur la réponse de Madame Gratadou? Si ce n'est pas le cas, j'aimerais inviter Madame Berg à nous rejoindre. Elle est donc expert économiste à l'Organisation internationale du travail. Elle va nous présenter une étude très importante qui a été réalisée et publiée il y a plus d'une année déjà. C'est à vous, Madame Berg.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to be here with you today. It's a nice opportunity. I'm here to present the report on non-standard employment. It's available on the ILO website. This is the summary. The longer version is quite thick and it has all of the details. So I hope that after my presentation you'll be inspired to look up the report. So non-standard forms of employment, we wrote this report at the request of our constituents. It was the outcome of a tripartite meeting of experts that we held at the ILO in 2015. There had been concern by the workers group that the rise in non-standard forms of employment around the world was impacting workers' ability to exercise their fundamental principles and rights at work. So we had this meeting of experts, tripartite, with workers, employers, government, and there was the conclusion made that non-standard forms of employment, it exists, so what we need to do is find policies and ways to make sure that non-standard employment be decent employment. There are reasons for why companies need flexibility, and that's fine, but that flexibility shouldn't lead to precarity. So in our work on non-standard employment, we're focusing on 4 main types of non-standard employment. The first one is temporary employment. So this could be formal workers on fixed-term contracts, but it also includes informal workers, many of them in the developing world, who are on casual work, who are either in the agricultural sector or in other parts of the economy. We also look at part-time and on-call work. So this could be traditional part-time work, people who work fewer than 35 or 30 hours a week, depending on how it's measured, but also new forms of short hours work, so marginal part-time. This would include, for example, the zero hours contracts in the United Kingdom. We also looked at multi-party employment relationships. So this would include your temporary employment agencies, for example, but also other forms of labor subcontracting. So whatever, there's basically 3 parties involved in the employment relationship. And then there's a 4th category, which includes first disguised employment, so people who are, for example, hired as an independent contractor, but are actually in an employment relationship. They have specific guidance on the work they're doing, they're expected to report to work, for example. But it also included another kind of gray area, which is dependent self-employment. And these are people who maybe started off really as independent self-employed workers, but then over time gained a certain dependence on their one client, and maybe over time that one client started making expectations that the person be available. So they kind of fell into this gray area. And interestingly, there are some countries that have specific legislation on dependent self-employment. However, another area of interest to us is the work in the platform economy. And so here we've actually been paying a lot of attention to what we're calling crowd work. So not just the work such as Uber, for example, that's locally based, but rather the work that's web-based, where you have a client in one part of the world, a platform in another part of the world, and workers spread throughout the world. This is certainly a new form of employment, and it's very similar to casual form of employment, except it's being delivered technologically. And right now, as it stands, this type of work is not being regulated, yet we see great potential for its growth. Unlike the locally based work, where we think there is kind of a limit to the size of the market, here there is the potential for more and more jobs to be put online. And what are the consequences for this? Right now, we see, for example, that people are hired as independent contractors. They're doing the work. Maybe they're paid through PayPal. Sometimes they're not being paid. There's problems of wage theft. But they're basically working informally. The work isn't reported to the Social Security Administration. They're not making Social Security contributions. And there's a host of other issues that we've been finding. So this is another area of focus of our work. But returning to the broad topic of non-standard forms of employment, what we see is that depending on the specific country, there are certain forms of employment that have gained more prominence. So in some countries, for example, like the United States, you would see a rise in part-time employment. In Europe, you've seen more of an increase in fixed-term employment. The issue of disguised employment relationships is found throughout the world, also in the global south. Also in the global south, we see an emergence of temporary work in pockets of the economy that were in modern sectors. So in the public sector, for example, or in manufacturing. Not to mention the other jobs that were already there that are non-standard. Okay, so what are some of the reasons for the expansions? Some of them, have to do with the transformations in the world of work that we all know about, the pressures from globalization to cut costs, and the ways that businesses do that to, find means for cutting costs. The rise of the service sector, which has demanded more flexibility in employment relationships. But we also see shifting organizational practices. So a tendency for firms to no longer be integrated vertically, but rather to, instead prefer a horizontal integration. So first we see an outsourcing of cleaning services, catering services in a company, but then it grows and it starts to include the IT workers, the human resource department, and other departments. So that, it's kind of lean and mean type of firms. And this has consequences really for workers' career development, because, certainly internal labor markets were an important way for workers to have that career development. It has consequences for public employment services and workers' own trajectory as far as skills, because more of the onus is on them to have the qualifications to find other jobs. But of course, there's another important reason, and that's the role of regulation. And what we see in the world, and this becomes really clear when you look at the data and you look at the different forms of non-standard that are in different countries, is what have been the legal changes that have occurred in the countries. And so what we found was that, starting in the 80s and the 90s, depending on the countries, maybe there were changes in the legislation, not so much it should change the standard employment relationship, but rather to introduce new forms, new types of employment arrangements that allow the use, let's say, of extensive use of fixed-term contracts and different forms of project-based or temporary contracts. There's also been some changes that distorted incentives and gave incentives to companies to use these forms of employment because they were cheaper. And so this is the situation, for example, if workers who work fewer than a certain number of hours per week or per month no longer have to contribute to Social Security or contribute less, then there's an incentive for employers to use this form of employment arrangement. Another reason is also the decline in unionization and the regulatory role of collective bargaining. Without unions, without collective bargaining, there were some sectors in some countries that didn't have any regulation governing them. And so you saw a rise in new forms of employment, not because they were legislated, but rather just because they appeared. So if you look at the United Kingdom, the practice of 0 hours contracts, it's not that a law was passed that allowed 0 hours contracts, it's that it just started being used, and yet there weren't strong unions to actually contest this. And then, of course, there have been all of the macroeconomic crises that have occurred since the past 30 years, and how that's affected firm behavior. Uncertainty certainly compels firms, to be more cautious in their hiring of workers on indefinite contracts, and then maybe instead have a preference to workers on temporary contracts. And then, of course, whenever there is an economic crisis, the first people to lose their jobs are those people on non-standard forms of employment. Okay, so our report looked at 3 different aspects. We looked at the firm use, why firms use non-standard employment, what are the implications for workers, what are the implications for labor markets and society in general, and then we looked at policy recommendations. I just wanted to give you a little bit of data. I was told not to put too much data in my presentation, but I want to give you a little bit of data on the firm use, because we were able to find some nice comparable data from the World Bank Enterprise Survey, so that's the pie chart on the left. 132 developing and transition countries. Their survey included the question, what percentage of your workforce is on a temporary contract of less than 1 year without the possibility of renewal? So this was a nice find for us, because the rest of our report used household labor force surveys, and those questionnaires tend to be different across the country. So here we had a questionnaire with the same question. And interestingly, what we found, this is looking at firms with more than 5 employees, registered firms in developing and transition countries, but what we found is that the majority of firms actually don't use temporary labor. So about 2/3, are not using it. Then you have another core group of firms that use it, but they use it more moderately. So this is about 1/3 of the firms. But then there's a small sliver of 7% that use it intensively. So more than 50% of their workforce is on temporary contracts. So this is really a reflection of a clear organizational strategy by the firm. And interestingly, and perhaps it's by chance, or maybe it says something, we then use the European Union Structure of Earnings Survey, which is also an employer survey, also has a question on the use of temporary labor, and we found the same close to number of 7%. When we looked at which economic sectors, the economic sectors that are more seasonal definitely use temporary labor more, and this you would expect, for example, in construction and transport and hotel and tourism. However, when you looked at the intensive users, this 7% green sliver, this had no bearing on the economic sector that they were in. So it's really a reflection of a clear organizational strategy. And in our work on the platform economy, we've actually found the same thing. So on the Amazon Mechanical Turk, which is one of the largest crowdsourcing websites, microtask websites set up by Amazon, there we found that the top users, so 1% of firms account for something about 50% of dollar activity. So it's really, this is how some firms, rather than having a fixed workforce, they have decided to organize themselves that well. Oops. Okay, so let me just show you a little bit of data too, comparing the countries. This is also based on the survey that I was telling you about. So here on the right, we compare Spain and Norway with the intensive users. And there you can see again that you have a much greater intensity of use in Spain, and also many more firms that use it moderately. So 35% use it moderately compared to Norway uses it 8.5%. So you can see here how you have, the same pressures from globalization, but a very different reaction depending on the institutional context of the country. So certainly that plays an important role here. But you also see the same thing in some developing countries. So in Peru, for example, which is the third bar on the right, 60% of firms use it moderately and nearly 10% use it intensively. So in Peru, especially the Andean countries in particular, what we found is that most formal employees now, so the majority of formal employees are on temporary contracts. And this is, again, an outcome of the regulatory changes that they made in the 1990s. So regulation does play a really important role. Okay, so what are some of the effects of workers? In the report, we look at 7 particular domains, and this is really a reflection of our understanding that employment isn't just about the earnings that you get and the Social Security cover, it's much broader. We have to think about workers' occupational safety and health. We have to think about workers' access to training, their ability to exercise their fundamental principles and rights at work. Do they have voice in the workplace? Do they have representation in the workplace? What does it mean for their career trajectory? And of course, what does it mean for their earnings? So we look at all of those dimensions. I'm not going to go through all of them because I don't have time. Oh, now I'm 5 minutes. Okay, so first we looked at the aspect of a stepping stone or trap. And really what we found here is very much the outcome of what's going on in the country. So those countries such as Spain, where you have a high percentage of the country, high percentage of the workforce on temporary contracts, we find there's really a trap. Workers are cycling between temporary contracts and unemployment and temporary contracts and unemployment. But where it's more constrained, then you see that it actually works more as a stepping stone. So the workers start out, it gives them an opportunity to enter the labor market, and then they take that opportunity and they enter into a better job. There's, of course, effects on wage penalties, regardless of the country. We have one exception, but it's a particular case, and I won't go into the details. Regardless of the country, if you take 2 identical workers, same level of education, same sector, here we're just comparing men, we find that somebody who's on a temporary contract is going to earn less. Oops. Okay, so our recommendations centered on 2 main axes. The first one is really about making the jobs better, and the second one about supporting workers. We feel that it's not just enough to beef up social protection systems. It's not enough to give everybody a universal basic income. You also have to make the jobs better. If you don't make the jobs better, you're never going to have enough social protection to support the workers. And we see this really clearly with our research in the digital economy, where people are making very, very little money with no protection. So even if they were to have some sort of basic income, it wouldn't be sufficient. So we focused our report really on these 4 aspects. The first one, what legislative measures do we need to be putting in place to ensure that these are good quality jobs, regardless of their contractual arrangement? How can collective bargaining be used? What are some of the best examples from collective bargaining agreements that have come out? What social protection measures do need to be taken into effect? I mean, we do need to change our social protection systems to embrace a wider form of contractual arrangements and to make workers be able to move more fluidly from different employment arrangements. And then, of course, what are the employment and social policies that are needed? I mean, we recognize that you can have the most beautiful laws in the world, but if you don't have a strong economy, you're not going to be creating decent jobs. So it's really important also to put job creation, investment, credit policies at the forefront of labor market policies, employment policy in general, and of course to complement that with other social policy measures. So I'm not going to go into detail. The one main legislative issue that I want to talk about, and this is fundamental, we think, is the issue of equality of treatment. So for us, regardless of the contractual arrangement, if the worker works only 2 hours per week, that worker should have the same benefits as a worker who works full-time. And so that has the option, okay, so certainly on a pro rata basis, but that means that whenever they start working, they're contributing to the Social Security system. They also have access to leave, to paid leave, to maternity leave, to all a host of other benefits, the same access to occupational safety and health, freedom of association, all the other benefits that come in a job. And by doing so, it means that these arrangements are being used because the companies need the flexibility and not because it's a recourse to cheaper labor. Because if it's just a recourse to cheaper labor, then it is going to lead to a situation of precarity. So I'm all out of time. I didn't plan things well. But you can read more details in the report, which you can download from our website. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Berg. Est-ce que quelqu'un a une question à Madame Berg? Moi, j'en ai une. C'est peut-être une question un peu naughty, comme on dit. Est-ce que c'est pas un peu facile d'accuser la numérisation comme étant la principale cause du changement dans les contrats de travail? Est-ce que le fait que l'on soit passé du secteur primaire, secondaire, puis au tertiaire, est-ce que le fait qu'on n'ait pas globalisé, est-ce que le fait qu'il n'y a pas une certaine féminisation du travail ne sont pas plutôt les conséquences les plus importantes de ces changements au niveau des contrats de travail?
No, certainly we don't think it's all technological, but technology is a means. If anything, it's really been the larger transformations in the world of work, the globalization, but all of those factors that you mentioned we discuss in the report. I mean, certainly the entrance of women into the labor market has meant that there's been an increase as well in part-time employment, for example. The outsourcing or offshoring of work to developing countries has meant also that there's been kind of an increase in temporary labor. You have cost cutting, whether the work stayed in the north or went to the south. You see this pressure of cost cutting from global supply chains has certainly contributed to the use of temporary labor. I mean, all of the factors that you've mentioned, we actually mention as well in the report. I mean, for us, it's certainly multifaceted. What's interesting about the digital is that it's making it that much more easier. I mean, the technology is just a way of facilitating all of this. And with the technological advances, we see that there's even greater potential for more of it. And we see that certainly in the research that we've been doing on the crowd-working platforms.
Merci. Est-ce que quelqu'un veut ajouter quelque chose? Non? Madame Gratadour?
J'en profite. Non, j'avais juste une question sur la prise en compte du genre et en quoi, en fait, les questions d'inégalité femmes-hommes par rapport à cette question sur l'emploi atypique, etc. En gros, est-ce que les femmes sont beaucoup plus impactées par rapport à toute cette analyse? Et est-ce qu'on a des données un peu plus sexo-spécifiques qui permettent d'aller plus en détail sur les aspects de genre?
Yeah, so we actually have a section, we'll have a whole chapter in the report devoted to women, youth, and migrants. And we have a full section on women. What we see really, what we find is that women are certainly overrepresented in non-standard forms of employment. Every country in the world, they're more represented in part-time work. In developing countries, it means they're more represented in part-time informal work, because it tends to be work in the informal sector. For temporary employment, there's actually a mix, because we found so much of it is really related to the sector, and because construction and transport tend to be male-dominated, we see that there's a lot of men also in temporary employment, but there's going to be also a lot of women, but just that they're in different sectors. But the numbers pretty much, we're pretty much the same. And then the other forms, again, I don't know if you would say there's gender balance, but they're certainly the same. But what we see, I mean, it's the same kind of recurring problem where people are saying, oh, well, these jobs are great because they give opportunities for women. But on the other hand, the women get trapped in these occupational sectors where the working conditions are worse. And then they get stuck in these jobs. So then this is really why it's so important to have better working conditions in these non-standard jobs, because by doing so, then you improve the situation of women.
Merci beaucoup. J'imagine qu'il n'y a pas d'autres questions. Alors maintenant, nous allons... Pardon? Ah, Afonso. Est-ce que l'on peut apporter le micro à Afonso, s'il vous plaît? D'accord.
Well, I wanted to know if you foresee a role for public employment services in the domain of non-standard forms of employment. Should we offer no temporary work jobs any longer, Or should we offer them, but only if they are stepping stones? Or what should be the policy of public employment services in that matter? And my second question is, well, we could regulate these kind of forms according to the normal way of working, but is that a really future-proof way of dealing with new evolutions in the world of work, or should we profoundly rethink our social security systems, our labor law system, our social dialogue on work, instead of, well, curing things? Maybe it's more efficient to rethink fundamentally the way we are dealing with all those new forms of work.
Doesn't work. Oh yeah, it does. Okay, thanks for that question. Gives me an opportunity to speak more, which is great. So, yeah, I've been accused when I present this report of kind of, oh, this is very old-fashioned, I'm going back to the 1930s, and we're not, that's not the direction that we're moving in. What we really want, or the way we see it, is that you can have all these forms exist, we just need to make them decent. So that means that, you know, in an ideal world, we'd all be working 20 hours a week, maybe, but we would also, we'd have good, decent jobs in those 20 hours a week. And so this is kind of the way that we're seeing it. And what does that mean then for public employment services, for, you know, for labor market institutions in general? We have a section of the report where we draw a lot from the work on transitional labor markets of Günter Schmidt. And so how can we transform, in essence, what we offer so that workers can, you know, can have leave then to do retraining, can have leave to take care of children or to take care of their elderly parents. You know, how can we rethink some of these systems? Because, you know, now we have a workplace where men and women are expected to be in paid work, which is fine, but, you know, we have families, we have societies, and we have, you know, we have communities, and we need time to do all those things as well. So we do need to be rethinking. The goal shouldn't be that everybody should be in standard employment relationships working long hours, because that's not really feasible for a society. So how can we rethink it? But that doesn't mean that we should throw out all of what we've learned in the past 100 years and throw out all of our labor laws. But what we need to do is really just how can we, you know, adjust our institutions to allow kind of more flexible forms of employment, but ensure then that these flexible forms of employment are good jobs. Yeah.
S'il n'y a plus de questions, nous allons passer au troisième présentateur, partons. C'est donc le Dr Max Hubert de la Commission européenne. Il est le chef de l'unique emploi, stratégie de l'emploi.
Thank you, Lydia, and good late afternoon to everybody. I'd like to thank you again for having invited me here and to allow me to broaden my horizons a bit, because working in the European institutions, the horizon usually goes now looking towards the south to the Mediterranean, and then it's finished. So here I have the opportunity to also learn a lot from other parts of the world. I work in the European Commission in the Director General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. We deal with in the unit with a lot of questions around employment, including the public employment services. Fons is here. He is the chair of the network, as you know, that we support, first of all, financially, but also by providing the secretariat. So we are really very closely involved in the work of this PES network, the European PES network. Now, since you have heard so many things about facts and figures, I will not go into this slide. Anyway, figures are controversial. And just to keep your attention and keep you awake, I will not anticipate, but refer already to an interesting slide of the next presentation that shows that maybe not so much has changed over the last decades when it comes to robots in this case. The next slide is also about the increasing numbers of new forms of work. Again, I don't want to go into that here. There are more better speakers or international institutions that do more research, like the ILO, for example, but also OECD. And I'd like to immediately come to the European Union's response to, or one of our responses to questions around the new forms of work, and that is the European Pillar of Social Rights, on which heads of state of all 28 member states have agreed a few months ago in Sweden, and it contains 20 principles and rights in 3 different areas, in the area of access to employment, working conditions, and social protection. It serves us as we always say, as a reference framework for our policies, for converging upwards, for bringing member states closer together, because not only in the world context, but also within Europe, there is quite some divergencies if you look at the performance of member states. It builds, as you can see also on this slide, on a lot of existing legislation and law already, but also adds a few new elements. It is accompanied by a scoreboard of indicators in the area of employment and social affairs that allows us to monitor developments in the member states, to screen and to identify and track trends and build policy recommendations on it. There are 2, or more than 2, but I will refer to 2 concrete initiatives that have grown out of the pillar. Here you have an overview again of the 20 principles. Again, the active support to employment is one that also mentions the public employment services specifically. Otherwise, I think the second pillar on the fair working conditions are particularly important for your work. For example, the information about employment conditions, but also secure and adaptable employment along the lines of the flexicurity principles. Now I've been asked to focus on 2 areas, and that is working conditions and social protection. In both areas, the European Commission has been active recently, and being active means for us usually to make proposals that can be policy recommendations or proposals for legislation. And on working conditions, we have in last December presented a proposal for a directive that is hard law, that is binding for the member states if agreed by member states and the European Parliament. They are currently negotiating, and this is a proposal for a directive that is called Predictable and Transparent Working Conditions. And its overall aim is to create new rights, in particular for the precarious workers, so workers in non-standard forms of work that are, as you all know, don't have the same protection as other workers. Here you have an idea about the content of the proposal that ranges from a limitation of the length of the probation period over a ban on exclusivity clauses. It has also an article on the predictability of work for workers that have variable schedules. So workers, for example, can then also refuse to take up an assignment without being penalized. Training, if mandatory, the costs of training cannot be put on the worker. Colleagues that are in charge of this proposal have done some calculations and came to the conclusion that around 200 million European workers will benefit from these new rules, basically all except the self-employed workers in Europe. In the first session this afternoon, I made an example, I gave an example from a member state that is in this case Belgium of SMART. This is an NGO that helps workers that are independent, that are self-employed, to get access to social protection, in particular by paying a certain percentage of their income to SMART. I heard after the last session from a colleague from Belgium that there are some issues around SMART, so I won't go into detail here before I have found out the latest developments. Which brings me already to the next proposal that is will never be binding if ever agreed. It is a proposal for a recommendation only, if I may say so, against the background that we see more and more workers without sufficient social protection, in particular in the famous non-standard forms of work. And with this proposal, we aim at extending the coverage of social protection to self-employed workers to allow them to adhere to social protection schemes, to become member of a scheme, and to facilitate also the transferability of benefits. That echoes a little bit what Céline mentioned. She mentioned the French compte personnel that also addresses this issue. An important element of the proposal is the transparency regarding the systems, because member states, again, if agreed, have to ensure that all the conditions and rules of their social security systems are fully transparent, that individuals know or are given free information about the entitlements they have. And these are entitlements regarding unemployment benefits, sickness, health care, maternity and paternity, and all the other points that you find at the bottom of these slides. I go on a little bit faster and come to another member state example, and this time it is Denmark, a recent Danish reform that have done exactly, not exactly, but let's say in the same vein, in the same spirit of the Council recommendation, adopted a new law that creates an unemployment insurance scheme for self-employed, and persons in non-standard jobs. This scheme is not enacted yet. It will take a little while, but is for us a good example, a good member state example that shows that the challenges we have discussed here all along can be addressed also by legislation. You might wonder what we in the European Commission do on unemployment benefits. There is a relatively recent exercise called benchmarking in different policy areas. We try to develop benchmarks for all EU member states to support convergence in the European Union, in particular in the economic and monetary union. It helps obviously also to implement the pillar principles I mentioned earlier. And now one of the latest areas we are looking at is benchmarking of unemployment benefits, with the kind of medium-term objective to agree at European level on benchmarks for unemployment benefits. So the question, what would be the benchmark? You can imagine it's hotly disputed amongst member states. If you think of what would be the right duration, what would be a good replacement rate, how about eligibility criteria, to agree on that amongst 28 member states that have in the end quite different systems and different traditions is not an easy task. Key will be to find the right balance between, on the one side, adequate income replacement that we all believe is important to support the transitions of people from one job to the next. That can, of course, include also unemployment spells, but that has to be balanced with sufficient incentives to take up a job. Because on the other side, there's then always criticism that if these benefits are too generous, that people don't take up these jobs. My last slide refers to some maybe broader activities on digitalization in the European Commission in the next months. The first one is actually due next week already, a communication on artificial intelligence and robotics, of course, much broader than only employment issues. There's also a lot about research and important for growth and competitiveness and so on, but it includes also an interesting section on the impact, the socio-economic impact of AI and robotics. And this policy paper is part of a broader package on what we call the digital single market. Secondly, we are now about, finally, it took a bit to set up a high-level group, a high-level expert group on the impact of digitalization on the labor market, and we will very, very soon launch a call for expression of interest. So experts can apply to become member of this group that will come up by the end of the year with policy recommendations that we then hopefully will also implement. And at least from my side, I would hope that a PES representative will be part of this expert group. Then in July, not in June, as you see on the slide, the Commission will, or DG Employment, will publish the famous, or at least in Brussels famous, report, Employment and Social Developments in Europe, that has the focus this year on the future of work. France, coming to the next point, can confirm that on the work plan of the PES network 2018, there is a lot on questions around the digitalization. Last week, I see also Mavis sitting here, there was a seminar or workshop in Estonia on digitalization, so we are supporting also in that area. For the Brussels insiders, maybe the fact that these days, really days and hours, everything is about the next MFF, that stands for Multi-Annual Financial Framework. That is the big budget for 7 years from 2021 on. For the European Union, this is billions of euros, and different departments are fighting now for their policy areas to be properly reflected in the budget proposal. And you can imagine that DG Employment is trying, so my DG, we are trying our best to ensure that there will be also sufficient funds available for preparing member states for the future of work, for better upskilling possibilities. We will hope that we can continue to finance the PES network and so on. And last but not least, and this is my last point, we are working closely with the OECD on a big project in which we map policy responses in all OECD member states to new forms of work at national level. We have now finalized, together with the OECD, an interesting questionnaire that will be sent soon to all OECD member states. There is a section also on public employment services, so I'm pretty sure, or I hope, that the public employment services will be consulted when it comes to responding to this questionnaire. That was a quick overview of things happening in the Commission in this area. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Max. Do you have any question? Any remarks? No? Can I ask you something, Max? It's about the implementation of this new law. You just decided this new directive. How are you going to report? And what could be the penalties of the different countries that are not implementing this new law? Is the Commission, can the Commission make pressure? Or I don't know, what could it be?
Yeah. First of all, I have to repeat that the directive is not adopted yet. And the negotiations are not easy. Some member states are quite reluctant to accept what the Commission has proposed. But once that is adopted, then member states have usually, first of all, a kind of transition period. They have some time to transpose this piece of legislation into their national law. And only then we start with the monitoring. That means, first of all, is the directive correctly transposed? And secondly, is the transposed law correctly implemented? And indeed, it is not always easy for us to follow the situation in all 28 member states. And that's why we rely very often on information from concerned stakeholders. And in that case, that could be workers. It is often trade unions that make us aware of what we then call infringements of EU law. And once we have assessed a situation and come to the conclusion that it is an infringement, then we launch what is called an infringement procedure that can go to the court, to the European Court. And at the end, the member state will be then kind of told to either transpose correctly, to implement correctly, or to pay a fine.
Yeah, thank you very much, Max. So it's quite a huge process that could be implemented afterwards. So now I would like to invite my colleague from the Swiss PES, Mr. Dominique Ohi, is going to explain to you how we are going to face this situation in Switzerland. It might be a bit different from what the European Union is planning to do. So Dominique, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Lydie. Hello, everybody. Subtitle of my presentation could be some evidence from Switzerland or the Swiss approach. The Swiss Federal Council has produced a report on the impact of the digitalization on employment, and I will give you a quick overview of its main findings. The agenda, first of all, we ask ourselves what is really new, maybe not everything, but a few things are new. There are new forms of work, we'll talk about them, and then I will ask the question, what do we believe are the success factors for mastering the change? And I will finish with some conclusions. Okay, what is really new? Let's start with this one. You see a picture you've all seen before. It just shows that we're not talking about the first industrial revolution ever. We are currently at the dawn of the fourth industrial revolution, one might say. The big question is, will the impact be very different from the last stage of industrial revolution? To be sure, the first two industrial revolutions have definitely shaped our societies, the way we live, the way we work, and so on. And even our social security systems that we have today are the results of these first stages of industrial revolution. Technical progress often begets fear. People ask themselves, are our jobs disappearing? What you see here is the cover of a famous German magazine called Der Spiegel, and the robot says, "You are fired." This was in 2016. What you see now is the cover of the Spiegel, same story again, from 1978, and also in 1964 people were afraid that robots would take our jobs. In its report, Impact of Digitalization on Employment and Working Conditions, the Swiss Federal Council has taken an overall optimistic view from its situation analysis. And I will try to explain you why. First of all, let's have a look at this. Since 1960, at least, the Swiss labor market has been in a state of constant structural transformation. And as in many other industrialized countries, the proportion of people working in each sector has evolved significantly. And as you can see, the services sector has risen to prominence, driven partly by technological advancements, among other factors like globalization and so on. What is important? The labor market as a whole has grown significantly throughout all these years, and the unemployment rate in Switzerland is still quite low, although there was a massive transformation in the past decades. We can look at this from a different perspective too. What you see here is the employment trend from 1996 to 2017. You see occupational groups. And what you see is, for example, that today we have much less clerks and people in related occupations in Switzerland than 20 years ago, and the same is also true for craft and related trade workers. So this might be also a result of automation, of digitalization, and so on. We don't observe the pattern that some people call polarization, because as you can see, the number of unskilled workers remained fairly stable, plus 55,000. This is not very much. But the number of jobs for medium-skilled people significantly decreased. And what is important, the number of jobs for high-skilled workers increased significantly, almost 1 million jobs more than 20 years ago. So this pattern could be called upgrading of the whole labor force, because the level of education and training has risen in all occupational groups. And that is also the reason why we don't have high unemployment now. We can look at it yet from a different angle. What you see here is that we have changes not only at the occupational level, but also in terms of tasks, in terms of duties. That means that occupations themselves have changed. The highest increases in employment are seen in analytical and interactive non-routine tasks. There was a slight increase in manual non-routine tasks and service tasks, and in contrast, manual and cognitive routine work has declined. So we have a massive change in Swiss labor market, as in many other countries can be observed. So here's what happened between 1996 and 2015. There are new forms of work. You've heard a lot about this today. I will keep it short. Technological developments facilitate increasingly flexible working arrangements by location, by time. but also completely new business models on the operational level. And we believe it's quite a good thing, so you can work wherever you want, home office, you can work whenever you want, for example at night, and there are also many benefits to new business models as well. But of course, new business models could also mean a rise of precarious employment relationships. So will we only have on-call work? Will we only have fixed-term contracts? Will we all have to be sole practitioners at low wages? We looked at the situation in Switzerland, the development in the past 20 years, and what we see here is that most people, the largest part of workers, are in a traditional employment contract. The number of sole practitioners has even declined since 2005, and fixed-term employments, on-call work, and employed individuals with several employers remains fairly stable at low rates. We commissioned a study in Switzerland on non-standard, precarious employment relationships, and what we can say is that approximately 2.2 to 2.5% of all employment relationships can be considered non-standard and precarious. There is neither an upward nor a downward trend that you can observe since 2010. So in a way, we don't really have a new challenge here right now. Here's a very specific challenge. It's obvious that the distinction between self-employed and employed is getting trickier all the time. In Switzerland, individuals are considered employed if characteristics typical of an employment contract exist, as is the case in many other countries too. I won't go through the details. There are two key questions. Does the individual employed bear specific business risk? That's the first question. And the second, is there a dependency of a commercial nature or in terms of the organization of work? And example from Switzerland, Uber is currently in dispute with social security authorities, with all of them in Switzerland, and the first rulings indicate that Uber is to be classed as an employer. What is important for us is that we find a good framework for these new business models as well, because we want to have them in Switzerland. There are new opportunities also for new jobs with these new business models. So what are the success factors for mastering the change? In Switzerland, we believe that a successful change is based on several pillars. The idea is seize opportunities and minimize risks. Of course, we want to be an attractive place for employment. The taxes shouldn't be too high. Wage deductions shouldn't be too high. We want to be a leading hub of innovation and research. You can't fight innovation anyway, so robot tax is probably not a good idea. We want to keep our high permeability of the education system that we have today. We want to keep the functioning social partnership, which is extremely important. And of course, we want to keep a stable environment, monetary and fiscal policies. Last but not least, I want to mention our proactive labor market policy and the flexicurity approach in the labor market and in social security. A few words to the labor market policy. The focus of labor market policy in Switzerland is on rapid reintegration. Unemployment funds pursue active labor market policy. They have quite a toolkit, so there's counseling and job placement, but they have also measures at hand to improve the employability of their customers in a targeted manner through labor market measures. For example, educational measures, employment measures, and special measures like training allowances. Somebody said this morning that the unemployment funds need more flexibility in the new era, and we believe that in Switzerland the unemployment funds already have quite a large degree of flexibility. So maybe we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Next point, flexicurity could be a challenge in the new era. What does flexicurity mean? We want to combine social security with a flexible labor market. And what could be the challenge in the new era? Social security should focus on the employed with the most difficult circumstances, and one can ask, does it really cover all forms of non-standard work or all new forms of work? And in terms of flexibility, the idea is that the labor market policy enables structural change. And right now we have some problems that I have mentioned before with Uber, the distinction between the status of self-employed and employed is getting more and more difficult, and here we have to find a solution. So the main findings. The Swiss Federal Council wants to improve continuing education of low-skilled and especially older employees. It wants to increase the basic skills of these workers. We want to improve the availability of data on new work paradigms and adult skills. We will participate in an international survey for the first time. And we decided to monitor the relevant trends in the context of digitalization of the labor market. There will be a report in 5 years. And finally, there will be some analysis and recommendations related to making social insurance, the social security law, more flexible, more up-to-date. But this work has just started this week, so I can't say very much about it now. Okay, I'm already at the end. In Switzerland, we consider digitalization as a moving target, and a wise person once said, it's not our job to predict the future, but to be prepared for it, and that's exactly what we're trying to do in Switzerland. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. Does somebody has a question to Dominic? No. Do you really think it is reasonable that the Swiss government didn't take any measures against atypical work form? Is it reasonable?
First of all, at the time we really don't have a problem with atypical work forms. And what our study also shows is that atypical work, precarious work, is in the most cases only temporary, and it helps people to get back into the labor market and find a decent job. And so it's quite a good thing. If we would see that people are stuck in precarious forms of work, we would have to take measures, but this is not the case right now.
Okay, thank you, Dominic. Mrs. Berg?
Have you done any studies in Switzerland about the use of digital labor platforms? So not the locally based Uber type, but the crowd working ones that I was discussing. Do you know of Swiss people? Oh, you plan to do it? Great.
Yeah, okay, I just said we plan to do it. We will do it next year.
Yes, thank you. So I think there is no more questions, so I would like to thank... No? Somebody has a question, sir? Oh, okay. So, is it possible to give a microphone to this person, please?
Thank you. Just now you mentioned that the change because of this digitalization about that the labor force. I noticed that maybe you can, if possible, go back to that PPT for that has a map set for the highly skilled you have that for the increase 940,000. I can understand that, but I also noticed that for the low-skilled or unskilled workers also has the increase of 55,000. I'm wondering the reason. At the same time, because of this, for the medium-skilled workers has a minus 114,000. So how to deal with that in your country?
Yeah, that's a good question. There was a decline in jobs for people with medium qualifications, and it was a rapid change, but it wasn't too fast for people. In Switzerland, we have a market-oriented education system, and so this is the upgrading that I already mentioned. Within 20 years, most people do some training, they educate themselves. So this means we don't have polarization, but we have an upgrading of almost all the labor force. Not all of them, but of a large part of the labor force. It has a lot to do with the education system.
But it's also true that in Switzerland we had an increase of low-skilled jobs because it's a reality. Because we have, for example, in the health sector, we really have low-skilled needs to take care of our elderly people in the Altersheim. This is a reality, and it will be also a reality in 20 years. We will have more increase in this low-skilled sector. Yeah?
I mean, I think that's true, but I think that it goes back to a fundamental issue of what we're calling skilled, low-skilled, high-skilled, and how we're paying it. I mean, caring jobs are important jobs, and so it's not an issue of whether we need more caring jobs. I think that that's fine, and I think that's an important occupation. We just need to make sure that the people who are in those occupations are getting paid well, are getting benefits, are being protected by occupational safety and health. And I think in the Swiss system, and in a lot of the other European countries that really are models, the important thing is that these people are covered by collective bargaining agreements. They have decent jobs. Whereas if you compare that then to the United States, where they're making maybe the minimum wage and that's it. And so that I think it's not so much about, we can't all be bankers. We need people to clean, we need people to cook, and that's fine, that's perfectly respectable work, and it should be paid well and treated well.
Yeah, thank you. I think our main target will be to decide what we can do with this middle-trained, middle-skilled person if they are going to occupy the lower skilled. and be less paid. This is more the problem that we have now than the low-skilled person. Do you have other remarks on this topic? If not, I would like to thank our 4 presenters. I would like to thank all the people that were interested on this topic. And I was told that we have to meet at 8 o'clock for those who would like to have the dinner somewhere. I don't remember the name. So please be on time if you don't want to stay here and don't participate to this gala dinner of tonight. Thank you very much. So I hope to see all of you in 3 years somewhere under the hat of waves. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Tomorrow we will have the report of these 2 workshops. Thank you.